Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor, along with Rick Broering, who was on the road in Cleveland, Ohio, getting ready to broadcast the Horizon League quarterfinal game tonight as we do this podcast, as NKU will take on Cleveland State. We'll talk about that game coming up in our college basketball segment, but we've got a lot to get to with college basketball winding into conference tournament time. Some teams getting in, some teams' coaches are mad at their team, and we got a lot of Bengals and Reds and all that stuff to get to, so let's get to it.
Yeah, a lot of extraneous cuss words in press conferences recently that we might need to discuss, Skinny. Let's start off there with college basketball. Let's start with my Norse because they are in the tournament time already in the Horizon League tournament. They won their first round game against Detroit Mercy 99-75 on Tuesday. That game was at Truist Arena. We are now in Cleveland. They play at Cleveland State tonight, who is the 2 seed. Skinny, I think when you talk about this NKU team, obviously we've been doing the whole, they turned it around again. They're playing their best basketball at the right time storyline for a week or two now. But Dan Goretzka has really put on a show the last couple of weeks. I mean, once again against Detroit Mercy, he was just fantastic the other night. And he's now in the last 10 games during which this team is 8-2 when they've been basically on this run. He's averaging over 16 points per game and shooting over 44% from three-point range on a good number of attempts, good volume. He's making over 2.5 per game from deep. So, I mean, man, to me, that's just really the storyline with NKU right now is the emergence of Dan Goretzka and what he's meant to this team.
Well, it's opened everything else up. I mean, it allows then, I think there's always a trickle down to that, right? Trey Robinson doesn't have to force. LJ Wells doesn't have to force. Sam Vincent doesn't have to force. Josh Dillon can go sit in the corner and make threes. Keenan Tijeray's not a real offensive force, but he doesn't have to be. But I think that just that trickle down effect of one guy taking that big jump up, I think has been noticeable. It's why they've won 4 games in a row, why they've scored 99 points the other night, for goodness sakes.
Well, and you brought up Josh Dillon. That's a great point, too, because he's the other Division II transfer that they added this year. And over the last 4 games, he's made 23s. I mean, he's averaging 5 3-pointers per game over the last 4. All of them wins, obviously, as they ended on this 5-game winning streak. I mean, those 2 Division II guys, as much as we talk about the transfer portal era and all these schools mining the lower ranks now for talent, pretty good job of NKU staff to find these 2 guys who weren't highly recruited, the other schools weren't looking for. Darren Horn, we actually just had Josh Dilley on the Darren Horn show this past week, and Darren said he gave Josh, quote, the worst recruiting pitch ever. Basically told him, look, we don't like you. We don't think you're athletic enough to play here. We like that you can shoot, but that's about it. This might not be for you. And Josh said, I really liked it. He was real with me. He told me what I needed to get better at. And I wanted to commit on the spot. I went back to my mom and said, should we commit now or wait a little bit to play this out? And they committed on the spot there. So
that's where mom's probably going, son, it doesn't sound like he wants you to commit.
Well, that's what I was interested in. I was like, you're all excited about moving up to the level. What was that like when he's sitting there telling you, basically, we don't really care for your game too much and we don't think you're good enough for us? And, he's like, I respected it because it was real. And I thought that's what I needed to hear. So credit to those 2 guys. They've really been fantastic. And I think when you look at the rest of the Horizon League right now, those other teams, NKU is a 7 seed. And no other Horizon League team since they changed this has won 4 games in the tournament to win a championship. But I think everyone's looking at NKU a bit differently as a 7 seed this year.
Yeah, and especially you win this game and get to the semis, then it's, oh my gosh, here they are again, a team that's had real good success in this tournament. Yeah, Milwaukee kind of handled them. Yeah, Robert Morris beat them. I can't say handled them because one of the games was in triple overtime.
Yeah, both of them were super close games. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think, and I think proves it. I think Robert Morris did emerge as the best team in the league and the team to beat. But man, if you get through tonight and you're in the Final Four of this, and you're a team that's won championships and has some players on the roster that have won that and done that, I think that's really super important.
Well, and you'd be going up against the team in Robert Morris who has all the pressure on them. I mean, Andy Toole getting that 1 seed and making the run he did this year saved his job at Robert Morris. He was on the hot seat going into this year. So now they're in the postseason. They've had their bye to this point. They're getting ready to play. I mean, assuming they win tonight, you'd face them in the semifinals, their first trip to Indy. There's a lot of pressure on them, and you don't know exactly how that team's going to react. It's also not a team with great guard play. So assuming everything goes chalk and NKU would face Robert Morris there in the semifinals in Indy, that would be a pretty good matchup for the semifinals. I think you'd feel pretty good about that one.
No doubt.
All right, let's move on to Xavier. They beat Creighton 83-61 on Saturday and then won at Butler 91-78 on Wednesday night. Skinny, let me ask you this. Xavier's clearly better than they were a month ago. I mean, that's kind of been the question. I joke with Mo Egger every time he has me on. He says, is Xavier good now? Basically, that's his question we start off with. Um, they're clearly playing better basketball, but do you think they're a real threat now, like to the top teams in the country, the top teams in the B's, or are they winning games that they should win?
Yeah, I think they're winning games they should win. I think that gives you some confidence though to go against them. But I just go back to I went to a couple Xavier games this year as a fan. My friend's a season ticket holder, and when his dad can't go, he asks me to go. He actually asked me to go to the Creighton game, and unfortunately, I couldn't go. I would have loved to have gone. But when I watched the two teams walk out on the court that night, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just a group of dudes. And St. John's is emerged. They're really really good with a great coach. I just the matchup for Xavier with them is just horrible. I don't think the matchup though is horrible with a Marquette. I don't think it's horrible with a UConn. It's obviously not horrible with a Creighton. I think the outlier for them, unfortunately, is they just don't match up with St. John's because St. John just bullies everybody.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, the St. John's matchup is really difficult for them, but they're play UConn initially. That seems like it's a tough matchup if you play them at Madison Square Garden. But to your point, I mean, I think pretty much everyone except for St. John's, with the way Xavier's been playing the last couple of weeks, you feel like they've got a pretty legitimate chance. And as much as we've been talking about the at-large
and even
bid,
there, Rick, not to cut you off, even there, I mean, let's face facts. They blew a game against St. John's. Just blew it in the second half
at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah,
they were up by 16 in the second half there and lost that game eventually in overtime. So I think maybe more so than the at-large bid right now, because the way the bubble's playing out, a lot of these teams are winning some big games down the stretch here. It's not falling apart the way we thought it might have a week or two ago for Xavier. It's looking like that 1-9 quad one record may still be an albatross that's holding them back, making it difficult for them to get that at-large bid. But they are playing well enough that I don't expect them to win the Big East tournament, but I think there's a reasonable chance all of a sudden.
I'm just going to have a hard time with this. And I get it. And I'm an SEC honk, but I'm just going to have a hard time with a 5-win in their conference, Oklahoma getting in, right? I mean, I get it's a full resume thing and all that, but you only going to win 5 games in your conference and you're going to get in. I mean, Arkansas goes to South Carolina, just gets boat race. South Carolina's terrible. They had one league win, and that came at a spot where you were playing desperate, and yet it doesn't feel like the bottom of the bubble has moved. It feels like Xavier's been entrenched on bracket matrix, and again, it's not the be-all, end-all, but it feels like they've been entrenched in like that 2 or 3 spot for the last month, right? Like you keep going, okay, they're almost there, and then you look at it, you're like, they ain't going anywhere. Nobody's coming down, and nobody's going up.
Yeah, and that's the problem for Xavier that I've been on really since this whole thing started. When we said, look, they've got to win like 9, 8, 7 games in a row. We kept kind of changing it by a game or so. They've got to win out the rest of the way. And even then, it might not be enough because there are no quad one wins left for them. Right. The end of their schedule didn't have the marquee wins available to them. And that's what's really cost Xavier. So yeah, they're winning out, but they're not moving up because they're not getting those big wins. And to your point about the conference records of, the SEC teams or the Big Ten teams now as we're building these super conferences, I think a lot of fans hate that. I think it's going to continue to become a big talking point in college basketball every year when we get to March. The problem is, Skinny, right now, conference record isn't something that's taken into account at all when they look at large bids. So it's just not really a factor.
Yeah, and I'm not here to tell you like an 8 and 10-ish with, if you had a good non-con and out of your 8 wins, 4 or 5 are quad ones, and out of your 10 losses, 6 or 7 are quad one. But 5? I mean, 5? That just doesn't feel like an NCAA tournament team.
I think a lot of fans feel the same way. And then, all the bracketologists are screaming back, that's not a metric they use. And it's like, okay, that's fine. We get that. But it's still annoying.
You and I both, we understand that, but it's still ugly to look at.
Right, exactly. And I think fans are still going to be bothered by it. And it's only going to get louder because we're going to see more and more of that as these conferences continue to fill up with big-time programs, as we've seen the last few years with realignment. With Xavier, go ahead, Skinny. You got something else there?
I was going to say, a buddy of mine and I were looking at this last night. We were looking at the potential bid thieves that can't lose their conference tournaments that would cost. It's funny because there's so many in these major conferences, you're not going to have bid thieves pretty much for the major I mean, I don't see a Minnesota rising up and winning the Big Ten tournament or something like that. But like you do got to have a Memphis probably win its league. You do probably have to have a Gonzaga, St. Mary's. Who am I missing? There's 3 teams in that kind. You got to have them. I mean, there's not a lot, but there's still enough to make you wiggle a little bit.
Yeah, I think this year probably sets up better than it did last year in terms of some of those middling conferences with teams with really good records and resumes that could get in that large bid even without winning their conference tournament. But I tell you what, some of the major conferences I think are getting scarier because, granted, yeah, there are 25 teams in the SEC, they're going to get in that large bid, but who knows this year in the SEC? I mean, you might have one of those other teams sneak up and make some noise. So it'll be interesting to see how the conference tournaments play out and if there are bid thieves. But with Xavier specifically, Skinny, the one thing that stuck out to me recently about some of these wins they've had is they're starting to hang on to these big leads all of a sudden.
Yeah.
That was a big issue for them all year. They'd get a lead and then they couldn't play from in front at all. I'm not exactly sure what's changed there, why they're handling it better, but I mean, really, just the last two games we've seen it against Creighton, who's a good team, and then you're playing Butler, who's not very good, but they are playing at Hinkle Fieldhouse on senior night, and they had some opportunities. They cut that lead back down to 10 two different times, and Xavier never let it get closer than that. They immediately had an answer on both ends of the court, pushed the lead back up to 16 or so points.
Well, because it always felt like it was like Zach Freemantle had to play great, and then it was always one other guy. It wasn't like three or four other guys. The other against Butler, it was five guys. Six guys if you want to go to the bench. I think that's the difference it makes there is it's not like it's falling on two dudes to carry all the load. And when those dudes either get tired or defenses adjust or they just simply hit a wall in a game that's human nature, and then you're looking around going, well, crap, he's not making shots tonight and he's not making play. Now it feels like you got 4 or 5 guys that are able to make plays and are going ahead and doing it. And I think that's a big difference.
Yeah, I guess actually the answer, like in terms of what they're doing, is kind of simple. They're taking care of the basketball, right? I mean, they only had like 6 turnovers over the weekend, had 5 turnovers in this game. I think they're doing a much better job there. And then to your point, the bench is actually giving them something now. I mean, John Hughley, the last 2 games defensively, has actually given you a few good stretches there where he's come in, guarded a bigger player at the center position, not fouled, not giving up easy buckets, and then you get him back out of there and you're no worse for the wear. That's a big role for this team to have, an extra big man that can come and defend for a few minutes at a time. And then, Dante Maddox has really been the spark plug off the bench for most of the last few weeks. He wasn't good at Butler, but most of the other games, he's been the guy off the bench giving them a lift. And recently, all of a sudden, Jerome Hunter has kind of reemerged as a guy who's playing solid again. Good defense, knocking down some open shots, getting a rebound here and there, just doing some things. So I do think the bench play has been crucial, along with them taking better care of the ball. And because they've won both of these games big by huge margins, their metrics have improved. They're up to 41 in KenPom. They've moved up 13 spots over the last 2 wins.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what they do in New York. I mean, they would probably be in the 4 or 5 game, right? So it probably isn't going to matter there, but that means you're going to have to face St. John's in the semis?
Is that right? I mean, you'll get UConn first, I believe.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about in the 4 or 5 game. If you win the 4 or 5 game, you would get. I mean, you had to win your first game of that, but the 4 or 5 game feeds into the one seed, so it would be St. John's in the semis, I believe.
Yeah, if everything goes chalk, of course.
Yes, correct.
If you're Xavier, you're just hoping someone beats St. John's for you, basically. All right, let's get to Cincinnati, Skinny. They lost at Houston 73-64 on Saturday, then lost
Everyone good enough. Everyone good enough.
Lost to Kansas State 54-49 on Wednesday night.
Blame me.
Is it your butt or your ass? Do you know?
It's both.
He went from butt to ass to butt in like a 10-second swing there while he was delivering his speech last night. Wes Miller. Well, let's talk about that first of all, Skinny, because I mean we've said the UC stuff ad nauseum now. We kind of know where it stands. They're not making the tournament this year. That is finalized now. You're pretty much stuck with Wes Miller going into next year. I think that is pretty clear at this point, or at least it seems. So how should Wes Miller be playing this? Because I did not think the press conference after this Kansas State loss, in which they scored 49 points, and he's doing the weird like sticking his chest out and cussing a lot and saying it's on me, and I don't recognize this team. How should he be handling this? Like, what's the right thing for him to do, knowing that he's coming back next season more than likely?
Great question, Rick. Because I don't know, was that the facade of, I'm the tough guy, and I am going to lay the shoulder of blame on me, and I'm going to fix this or is it just a guy grasping at straws? I mean, that's what it felt. It feels like a guy just grasping at straws because there just don't seem to have been any answers at all this year. I mean, I gave him credit for the lineup change. I do think the lineup change helped at times. But for the most part, it's still their actions are just so bad offensively. For me, if I'm him, I got to figure out a way, and I know it's probably a guy that won't even want to do it because it's going to be a lame duck staff to some degree. I got to get myself an offensive coordinator somewhere.
I have a thought on that.
Okay.
I actually, it's not really an offensive coordinator, but I have a thought on what he needs to do.
Okay.
Let me just say this though first, because I want to talk a little bit about that game. That sequence late where they were down 3 with like 50-ish seconds left and Kansas State had the ball, They wait 15 seconds. The ball comes into the front court, and Aziz Bandaogo is out on the perimeter guarding the ball at this point. All of a sudden, and by the way, I watched the replay about 20 times. I can't see what Wes Miller is doing in this moment, but Aziz Bandaogo is clearly sitting down, guarding, playing defense, as the whole team had been doing for 15 seconds. He looks up towards the bench, glances there, sees some type of signal being given to him, and then tries to go and foul. And at that point, you basically lost the game. You made it a two-possession game.
Right. You either play the shot clock out or you play the foul game immediately.
Right. And honestly, I don't think you play the foul game that you're only at.
Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you, but I think it's 1 and 2. I'm with you on that. But it's 1 and 2. You don't play the middling game of fouling halfway through the shot clock.
Yeah, that was inexcusable to play the middling game, but I honestly don't know if Wes just didn't understand that situation, if he thought the score was a 4-point game instead of 3. I have no idea, because he clearly called for them to go foul at that moment.
Wow.
And that's a game you still have a chance to win. It's a one-possession game and no one's scoring. If you get a stop right there, you've got the ball and a shot to win it. And let's be honest, all your offensive possessions are random. You don't run anything. It's just Jizzle James going one-on-one with you kind of clearing out for him. So the chance that he could hit a step-back 3 or Day Thomas could do that, it's no different than any of your other possessions. So I would feel pretty good about that if I'm Wes Miller, about getting the ball down by 3 with one chance left, or as good as I felt about any other possessions. I have no idea why you told them to go foul there. If I was a UC fan, that would have been a really hard stretch to watch.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I hate the middling game. Listen, I give you, you want to make one quick trap, and if you don't get the quick trap, you foul. That's fine. I'm not a big play the foul game guy either. At that stage, I'm play the shot clock guy, but you can't play it in between.
Yeah, and I really just think he completely blew it. I don't even think it was got caught in between thing. I think he just either didn't understand the moment or thought the score was different than it was or something. But he looks like a coach who's spiraling a little bit. And that post-game press conference was he's talking about being too hard on guys, that he can't coach them in this era. And it's you're the exact opposite of that. You're a player's coach. You're too soft on them.
Yeah, and if that's the excuse, and listen, I know it's a hard era to do it, and we've talked about that, football, whatever. Listen, if that's the case, then get out. Just get out. Go coach high school basketball.
And that's the problem. When you start saying stuff like that, you make it sound like the job's too big for you. And I realized that when you're in that position and all anyone wants is for you to make the NCAA tournament, and you realize you are not going to make the NCAA tournament 100% now, you feel like the world's caving in on you a little bit. You do feel like you're spiraling to some extent. There's not much you can say in that moment that's going to come off as sounding good or look right. But I do know that press conference wasn't it from Wes Miller. That was a bad look.
That was a bad look.
All right, let's switch gears to Kentucky.
What did you say you would do?
Oh, yes. So here's what I would do if I was Wes Miller. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. And I know what the reaction is going to be, but I think this is a very unique situation. You got to call Bob Huggins and bring him back as an assistant.
I'm not so sure that's a bad idea.
Bob Huggins is going to try to take your job from you. He will 100% believe when you ask him to do that he is going to be the next head coach at Cincinnati. That's his chance to get back in. He wants to get back in. He feels like he was wronged. He would love to do it at Cincinnati. So he is 100%. You got to know that if you're Wes Miller, he is going to try to take your job. But you only have one more year regardless as it is right now. And if you bring back Bob Huggins, at least this fan base gets behind you for that 1 year. At least they give you one more chance. That's a real chance. It's not a lame duck sitting year where you can't recruit, you don't have NIL funds, people don't really want to see you do well because they just want to get rid of you as soon as they can afford the buyout. If you bring back Bob Huggins, it eliminates that for one season, and people give you a real shot where they're really backing you and they're really in your corner and they want to see you succeed. And then if you turn it around from there, maybe you keep your job at that point because they're still not in a good financial point to get rid of you. And Bob Huggins is a veteran guy who understands this area, who might be able to actually help you out a little bit with some of the things you need help with.
And I'll be honest, I'm with you on Hugs wanting to get back in, but he may find out life as an assistant really ain't that bad at this age. Who's the old St. Joe's coach? Phil Martelli. Yeah, he did that and seemed to do fine. I mean, listen, I still want to be a high school head coach when I have the time to run a program. But you know what I really enjoyed more than I thought? I like being an assistant. I like still being able to do scouting and still being able to run practice drills and still being able to have major input in-game stuff. And at the end of the day, I was a gesture. I don't listen. I want to run my own game again one day. I do. I got a chance to coach a JV game because the coach was sick, and I really enjoyed running the game again. We all do. It's an ego rush. It's all those things. But you know what? I enjoyed way more than I thought being an assistant, and I'm not so sure he wouldn't mind that.
I think that's true, Skinny. And I also think if there's any place where an assistant job will make you feel like you're a king and you are essentially a head coach, it's Bob Huggins being back at UC right now.
And the thing is, to your point, I mean, you have nothing right now other than a McDonald's All-American who's one guy. You have nothing for the fan base to look forward to next year. You really don't.
It's a total lame duck year. And I realize
Yeah.
everyone's going to be like, you're an idiot. Huggins is a drunk. He's had all these issues and he's passed it. What I understand all of that. And I understand Huggins is probably delusional to think. I mean, there were rumors going around last year that Huggins thought he was getting back in and going to get a job and he was calling assistants. Now, if you want to believe that, that's up to you. I don't know how true it was or not. But I believe the people who told me, I believe that he probably was making some calls to look in on it. And I know that he wants to be a coach again. I don't think it's a crazy idea, honestly. I mean, I understand why people will say it's a bad idea, and there is some legitimacy to that. But if you're Wes Miller, I don't think you have any choices at this point. You are going into a lame duck year where no one at that university wants you to do well.
No, exactly, and that's just a horrible place for everybody to be because the second any level, I mean, go lose to Xavier next year. Can you imagine what that's going to be like? Even though you finally got that off your back this year. I mean, goodness gracious.
100%. I mean, they're going to go. I mean, just from a standpoint of recruiting, think about him going and asking for help with NIL money or anything like that. I just can't imagine a lot of people being like, oh, yeah, I really want to take that meeting today.
Yeah, no, agreed.
All right, let's go on to Kentucky, Skitty. They lost Auburn 94-78 and then hammered LSU 95-64 earlier this week. On the news front, Jackson Robinson is out for the year after having wrist surgery. So we did get some big news there. Also, thanks to the Ole Miss win over Tennessee on Wednesday, Kentucky has avoided playing on Wednesday in the SEC tournament. They're looking likely to get the 6th seed, which means they'd be playing in that last game on Thursday.
Well, they have to beat Missouri to get the 6th seed.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's looking likely they'll get the 6th seed. They could still end up as the 5 or 8. I mean, anywhere in between there. So.
To your point, though, no worse than the 8, which gets you out of that. That gets you that out of that first mess of games.
Yeah. Any thoughts about where this Kentucky team is at after these last two?
I mean, getting Lamont Butler back is helpful. I think the finality of knowing what the Jackson Robinson situation is probably a good thing. It's not a good thing that he's not going to play, but at least now you can't sit there and go, boy, can't wait till Jackson comes back. Things will be you're not getting him. So there's that.
Yeah.
But you did get Lamont Butler back. A little disappointed in the performance against Auburn, but watching just Auburn's just so stinking good. They got so many offensive weapons, and they were banking. I mean, the one dude banking in a 3 from each wing from 28 feet out. I mean, they were throwing some stuff in, but they're just super, super talented. I know they lost their next game, but guess what? They'd already done. They'd already clinched the SEC. They've already clinched probably the overall number 1 seed in the country, no matter what else they do this year. And guess who they got coming up next on the schedule after Kentucky because they lost their game, and the next game's Alabama. So it was a complete trap game that they played. They're super good.
They are. Kentucky's been really good against the top teams this year. We've talked about that a lot. So I don't want to go too overboard with this, but it did feel a little bit like watching that game. Kentucky's going to need to throw out a junk defense or something to make a real run in the postseason.
The other thing too is though, and I like concepts of the Zoom offense. I do, but if it's kind of all you do and they're able to switch everything on those interchanges, you ain't getting very far downhill against it.
Yeah, it can get stagnant at times for sure. When you got a team that really switches well, I've always thought that. I think switching defense, I really love the matchup zone, that kind of Willard defense that Cronin's run, that Kevin Willard's run, that Darren Horn runs at NKU. I think that's a great defense for college basketball because it confuses team. It's hard to prepare for. But
you can also cover the 3-point line with it too.
Exactly. But a step down from that, I think the next best defense that's a little more standard, that coaches are a little more comfortable playing, is just switch everything. Yeah. I think it's with all the screening actions, all the dribble handoffs and the zoom actions, I think a switching defense is as good as you can go in college basketball right now.
And listen, you're going to get caught in an occasional switch, a big bad mismatch in the post, and they're going to lob over and he's going to dunk it for 2. But a lot of times, I mean, sometimes it's a 6'3" guard who got matched with a 6'11" guy. He's still long enough and athletic enough to front it with some backside help on it. You're not going to get that every time down the floor.
Well, and Skinny, how many teams are actually skilled, good, aware enough, and ready to punish you in the post on a consistent basis? A lot of teams just don't do that consistently anymore. Right. So even when they see the matchup, they make a bad entry pass, or your big man doesn't have polished moves and he doesn't score it with the advantage. So
doesn't seal well.
Yeah, I'm big on not worrying too much about the advantage. I mean, if it becomes a problem, you can always adjust from there and quit switching that matchup. But
so I when I coached AAU and when I ran my own, I'm a big switch guy. And there's a high school coach. He's no longer coaching a guy, Bishop Brossert, Mike Code.
Yeah.
And I was covering a game newspaper wise, and I talked to him after the game, was writing the story and getting my quotes. And when we got done, I said, Mike, I know it's not going to fit my story. Nobody's going to care about a switching defense, but as a basketball geek, I said, look, you switch everything, right? He goes, yeah. I go, what happens when you get a mismatch in the post? He goes, so he goes, you just got to battle hard in the post. I thought, that's a great thing, because that way you're not worrying about getting caught in ball screens. You're not worrying about, did a guy call switch or not? Did you not worry about hedging it properly? You just switch it automatically.
Well, it also helps in Northern Kentucky high school basketball, where you guys are coaching against 6'3" white post players.
There's absolute truth to that too. But to your point, even when you get the mismatch in college of the 6'11" guy, I mean, he's probably not skilled enough to post up properly or to seal properly or to finish properly.
Yeah, definitely. One other thing on the Kentucky, this is not related to their game or anything, but I thought this was funny. I saw on Kentucky Sports Radio today, Owen County High School was taking a field trip to KS Bar and Grill to watch KSR Radio today. Is that not the most Kentucky thing that you have ever heard in your life? That someone signed off on a field trip for an entire class to go drive a decent way to go watch KS Radio for a day.
Maybe it's a communications class and they want to learn how a show like that is run.
Absolutely. It very well could be. That was my assumption too, Skinny. That is still the most Kentucky thing that I have ever heard in my life.
That's out. Kudos to that teacher.
Yeah. Shout out to whoever's getting it done at Owen County High School today. All right, let's switch gears to the Bengals, Skinny, unless you got anything else on college basketball.
Nope, I'm all good right there.
All right, just a couple of Bengals topics to get to. We'll go back to the T. Higgins well. I mean, it feels like we talk about him every week. He was officially franchise tagged. Skinny, a lot of people got worked up about this again. It seems like we knew this was coming. So what does this mean now that he is actually franchise tagged?
And I don't understand why people got worked up about it. It's either you tag him or he walks to free agency next Wednesday. I mean, is that what you wanted? I know people want the deal done. People need to keep this in mind. Because he was franchise tagged last year, by rule, you cannot start negotiating a contract for an extension until the 2024 season had ended. That was on whatever that was, January 6th. Could you argue that 2 months have gone by? Yeah, but when you're doing a nuanced deal like this, that sometimes isn't enough time either. So all this did was it bought you 4 more months to negotiate. It also guarantees one of two things. T. Higgins is going to be on this roster in 2025, whether he likes it or not, or you're going to have some trade value there with T. Higgins. I'm going to take them at their word, Rick, that they want to get a deal done. I just don't know what I've talked about this. I don't want to prove. No, everybody on the beat that I cover with, none of us really know where the line in the sand is. I saw a story on CBS Sports today. Joel Corey, who's an agent, I find a lot of his stuff really, really good. He calls it an agent's take, and he tried to set a market value for 10 offensive free agents, and he included T in the mix, and he had T at a market value of $31.1 million per year, and I thought, God, that feels awful steep. That just feels just like a hair too steep. And if we get to that level, maybe you just say, you know what? We're good. You're going to play on the tag. And you know what they can do next year for a third year? It's going to cost them. It'll cost them 140% of what he's currently making. So it's going to be in the $30 million. You can tag him again.
What did he get paid last year on the tag? Is it top 10 money? Top 10 is
he got $21.8 million. And so if you get tagged a second time, I think the market rate for wide receivers this year was 24.5. But because T got a second tag, his tag price is 120% of what he made last year. That's why he's got $26 million. Next year, if they do it a third time, it's 140% of what he makes this year. So it's a pretty good bump.
So, Skinny, I just wonder when we're talking about drawing the line in the sand, I mean, you've now already paid him top 10 wide receiver money last year. Now he gets a bonus on that at 120%. So you're paying him $26 million this year. So you're not like $48 million over the last 2 years for him. You're talking about potentially another franchise tag, which has never happened. No one's ever done the third franchise tag because it's too cost prohibitive. But I mean, just even these last 2 years, depending on how long of a deal we're talking about, if it's 4 or 5 years down the line, you've already paid 2 years of primo money. Are they really saving that? What are they negotiating for here? Are they saving that much money if they're not franchise tagging him?
Well, again, if they don't, here's the thing. I don't think they feel comfortable. I don't know this for a fact, but I think this is where the comfort level is the availability factor of playing only 12 games in 23, playing only 12 games in 24. The peace of mind of going, okay, we got him this year, but we're not locked into 26 and 27 and 28 for a guy that we don't know how many games will he play. Maybe he plays them all. Track record right now suggests he's not going to do that. So am I going to really put a bunch of guaranteed money on the table for a guy I honestly don't know how many games he can play?
So I kind of get that, but then at the same time, again, you're already paying him a ton of money now, and you're still trying to negotiate a long-term contract for down the line. It just feels like you're kind of already
Where's
paying him anyway. I understand you're not locked in, but you're allegedly trying to lock yourself in. So
understood, but at your price, I mean, I just
at
think that
your price, but you're paying a premium now. So aren't you losing some money on the front end already?
I don't. No, you got the peace of mind of at least keep. You had to make a decision by March the 4th whether to tag him or let him walk. So you kind of were up against it. You weren't gonna let him walk.
I hear you. I guess what I'm saying is what you're saying makes sense. But what I'm getting at is I think maybe where a lot of the frustration comes in for Bengals fans is this seems like a nickel and diming situation where you're trying to save maybe a little bit of money that you're talking about because of your concerns about his injury history. When at the end of the day, players inside your
Well,
franchise are losing faith in you and no longer buying in because they don't feel like you're doing right by them. And I'm not saying you should just throw money to everyone that asks for money from you and you should give them every demand they have from a contract standpoint. But if you've decided that T. Higgins is your guy and you really are making a good faith effort to sign him long term, it feels like you might be haggling over some pennies here.
I don't think you are. And I'm just using Joel Corey's piece. It's not the be all end all. He is a former agent. He's got a feel for the marketplace far better than I do, far better than probably a lot of people do. Again, he had 31 point whatever 1 mil as the average, 60 mil fully guaranteed at signing, 90 mil in potential guarantees. Right now, I'm only guaranteed to pay that guy $26 million. So I get it. So I think a lot of this haggling portion of it is maybe it is nickels and dimes, but I think it's also in the guaranteed portion of it. Of what do you feel? What do you feel is a safe net for you to give T. Higgins guaranteed money with the injury history? I don't. I think everybody's just throwing that injury history out the window like it's not a factor. It has to be a factor.
It has to be a factor, but my thing would be like this: if it's a factor, then he's probably not your guy. Like you're going to sign for
Maybe,
like 2 or 3 million less average annual value and feel good about that? No, you're still going to have to
maybe.
guarantee him a ton of money. So it's like if you don't think he is durable enough to be worth this money, then I feel like you probably shouldn't be trying to negotiate a long-term contract. Maybe this is the end of the road. You just say we're franchise tagging you this year. We're
It
trying to
could
make a run
be.
with you this year, and then that's the end of it. And I'm okay with that if that's the solution. But I just think then we're getting a lot of lip service about trying to negotiate a long-term contract when
Well,
that really might not be the plan.
I said this to you in that silly ESPN story that sources said the Bengals are going to try to sign Higgins, Hendrickson, and Chase. Well, sure, nobody ever didn't think they're not going to try, and
Right.
that's I think where the semantics are. I mean, I do think they're going to try, but at some point, I'm going to try to buy a new car here pretty soon. I haven't bought one in 12 years. I'm going to try to buy. I would like to try to buy a Porsche. Probably not going to be able to afford that, so I'm going to have to try to buy something else. May not be able to afford that, so that's I'm going to try. It doesn't mean I'm going to do. I can say try all I want. They can say try all they want. Doesn't mean they're going to do. I think they're going to try.
So do
Try to
you
what extent?
would you so what I just laid out there, do you think that's more than likely the scenario? Do you think they're actually probably not trying to negotiate a long-term deal
No, I
with T
think
at,
they
at
are.
his
I think they are at what they feel is the right price. And I honestly, I don't want to pretend to know what that right price is.
Gotcha. Do you think, I mean, a lot of people, it seemed like, thought that you mentioned they couldn't have negotiated till the end of this past 2024 season. So you had a 2 month window between then and now where you had to franchise tag him. Is it unrealistic for people to think they could have gotten something done in that period? Because that seemed to be what most of the people getting upset was about. Like, how did you not get a deal done by now? And it's like,
That's
it
where
didn't, I didn't think that was ever going to happen based on what you and others had
yeah,
said.
that's where I go back to. I don't know where their campus set a number. I don't know where the Bengals campus set a number. Are we this far apart? Are we this far apart? Are we apart on guarantees? Are we apart on length of contract? I think there's a lot of back and forth that goes on that I just don't know if anything was going to be able to get done in two. I don't think there was a number that the Bengals could have said that T's camp would have said, I'm good. And I don't think there's a number that T's camp could have said that the Bengals said, that sounds good. Let's get this done.
So they have until mid-July now to work out a
July
long-term deal?
15th. Yeah, July 15th.
Okay. The other bit of news in Bengals land was Sam Hubbard announced on social media that he is retiring. Played 7 years, all with the Bengals, 104 games. He was a part of that Super Bowl team. Just an awesome career, an awesome way to end it, an awesome way to go out. I thought this was really cool that he just did it on his own terms. He
Yep.
didn't go to another team. I assume, Skinny, and I imagine this is, you can fill us in maybe on the details here. Do you think the Bengals probably went to him and said, yeah, we're going to have to cut you as for a cap situation? And he said, okay, no problem. I'll just ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, and the only thing I wonder is did the Bengals, say, hey, we're going to have to cut you for cap reasons. We'd like to bring you back for a year at 2.5 mil, to name a small price. And if you're Sam, that sounds like a lot of money. It is to all of us, but Sam's taking care of his money. He's a smart guy. He's going to have a bright future in whatever he does. I mean, this is a guy that honestly, he wasn't very good this past year. He played with a significant amount of injury. I mean, I remember talking to him like week 4 or 5, and I said, "Are you still bothered by an injury?" He said, "Yeah, but I don't want to talk about that. I just don't." And he was dealing with a hamstring injury into the season and playing with it. And I think you get to a stage in life when you're a smart guy who's got a lot of other things you can and want to do in life, that at some point the money isn't worth it to go, I'm not putting myself through more injury stuff. I've had a fine career. I go out on my own note. I've got plenty of money. He's a finance major. Hell, he can probably go run a Fortune 500 company before all is said and done. I think you just get to that point where, you know what? Yeah, I'm not playing for 2.5 mil. Again, I don't know if that's what the Bengals did, but I guarantee you they told him he was going to be a cap casualty. We all have written that, so it's not like this was going to come as a surprise to anybody. Hell, I'm sure he knew that he was not going to play this year for the $9 million that he was going to be paid. I mean, they were always going to whack that off the books. I just wonder if they came back and said, Sam, we'd like to have you back. Be a one down guy, first down guy on the edge. We'll pay you 2.5 mil with some incentives, and he thinks long and hard and goes, nah, it's not worth it for me to do that. But thank you. I'm just going to retire as a Bengal. I'm guessing that's what happened.
From a fan's perspective, it's pretty cool that this is the way it ended, because this year did feel like a little bit of like it's getting to that point. You're not really that guy anymore. It feels like you're really slipping here and becoming a bit of a weak link. You stick around another year, and then you just fans are crapping on you and they don't want to see out there anymore. It becomes kind of that negative connotation attached to you. Whereas it's still like if you say Sam Hubbard's name, the immediate thing that pops in my mind is the 98-yard return against the Ravens in the 2022 wildcard game. And now it always will be. That'll be the first thing that I think of with Sam Hubbard immediately, is just like, what a great career. Hometown guy, one of the most memorable plays in Bengals history, certainly the most memorable play of my lifetime. And then how about the fact that his last play as an NFL player is him catching a touchdown? What a storybook ending.
Yeah, I was going to say that I was going to ask you that question. What a great bar bet that'll be in 5 or 7 years. What was Sam Hubbard's last play as a Bengals player? Was it a sack? Was it a tackle for loss? Was it a safety? And you stump a bunch of people and you go, nope, he caught a touchdown pass. What a way to end it.
It's great. I mean, his first and only touchdown reception. And I just like the fact that there's not going to be a contract dispute. He's not going to another team for cheap, not playing well, and then bashing the organization in Cincinnati for not meeting his demands or anything like that. It's just like he's riding off into the sunset. He's been such a big fixture here with Cincinnati's Children's and all the charity work he does. Like, I'm sure he's going to continue to be around doing that stuff. It's just a feel-good moment, I guess, in a sports world where we don't always get those.
No, I agree. And it's interesting. I read a piece on Bengals.com. We tried to talk to him yesterday, and they couldn't set up a press conference or a Zoom conference for us, which is fine. I get it. But I guess he talked to Bengals.com, which is fine. It's in-house. I understand it. He didn't think that the fumble return was the biggest play he made in Bengals history. He thought the back-to-back sacks against Kansas City in the AFC Championship game were the biggest plays. And maybe he's right.
Wow, that's a good point. I mean, for him, he probably doesn't look as the fumble recovery as impressive of a play, too.
Right.
The sack is the harder thing for him to accomplish, right?
Yeah, that one sack, because I think they only rushed 3 on the one play where he had that one sack, was really a big play and impressive. And maybe for him, it's like the fumble just popped in my head and my hands. I just ran.
Yeah, that's a good point. Interesting. All right, anything else on the Bengals, Skinny?
No, just for housekeeping's sake, there's probably going to be a couple more cap casualties. I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see Jermaine Pratt get cut. We already saw Alex Kappa get cut this week and actually get signed by the Raiders. Zach Moss might be in the cap casualty category. So I think there's a couple more guys that could get in. A reminder that the free agency negotiation period starts this coming Monday, and then free agents can officially start signing after 4:00 on Wednesday.
All right, we'll switch gears to the Reds now. We'll start with this. Say whatever you want about it. We can move on. Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred is reviewing a request for Pete Rose to be removed from MLB's permanently ineligible list, which would lead to his eventual selection to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. According to reports published last Saturday, Manfred met with Rose's daughter, Fawn, and his former lawyer about reinstatement in December. A formal petition was submitted on January 8th. There's also the fact that President Trump pardoned Pete Rose. We don't know what for or why or what that would even mean, but he said those words. So that has also happened.
Yeah, this if this is what his family wants and they eventually go through with it, I guess it's good. It just would be heartbreaking that a year, less than a year, whatever that time frame is after he passes, then you decide to do this. I mean, so what? You want to be that injurious of him? Come on.
It's spitting on his grave, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess if the family still wants this, then maybe
right.
it is the right thing to
That's the
do.
part
But
for me.
if I was part of his family, I would feel more disrespected by them doing it now, because it's almost like you really did just want to do it to spite him. And it wasn't about the rule that he broke, or that you really think it's something that you can't possibly ever relent about. It's fine to just say, like, Pete Rose is one of the greatest baseball players of all time. We love him. And at the same time, he broke a rule that we're never going to let you break. You can't be in our Hall of Fame. You can't be associated with our sport ever now. I'm okay with that. But this idea that you're going to say, well, now that he's dead, it's not that
Yeah,
big a deal. We can do it because we're in bed with gambling anyway, and FanDuel does commercials with us and all that type of stuff. It's like, that would piss me off so much if I was his son.
yeah. Again, if it's what the family wants, then okay. Well, who am I to tell you that it just? But if that's when they're going to do it, just shortly after he's passed, man, that feels that to your point. That feels like they're absolutely just pissing on his grave.
Yeah, because he wanted it so bad too.
Right,
I mean, he
right.
really wanted that moment. I think a lot of people might have moved on and said they didn't care about a Hall of Fame or something, but Pete did care. It mattered to him. And
Yeah.
yeah, to me, this just seems more disrespectful than anything, but uh, I'm not in his family, so maybe they feel differently. Uh, just in terms of spring training, looking at a couple things, just a couple notes. CES has hit a couple of homers. Good to see. Will Benson hit a 465-foot blast the other day, and Ellie continues to hit homers. He's got 3 of them now.
Is Will Benson going to play his way on this team? He can't, can he?
I don't think so. But there does seem to be a bit of a groundswell of support again for Will Benson out of nowhere.
Yeah, the only thing that really jumped out to me this past week was the good and the bad of Hunter Green. He had one outing where he just got clobbered and then came back with a couple of shutout innings. I don't get alarmed by it, but it was an outing where he got clobbered.
Yeah, we've got also 2024 first rounder Chase Burns made his debut through an inning, had a walk, had 3 strikeouts, hit 100 miles an hour 4
How,
different times.
how about Chase Petty?
Chase Petty looked very impressive as well. A couple injury things though too, Skinny. Spencer Steer's shoulder injury, he's been dealing with it for a year now. It only impacts him when he throws the ball, but he got a cortisone injection and could start the season on the IL. Andrew Abbott through live batting practice and is expected to pitch in games soon. They're hoping that he might be ready for the start of the season. And then also Cam Collier recently injured his thumb on a tag play. The initial thoughts are that it's not good. He's going to see another specialist in Arizona, but he's going to miss some time. He's the Reds' number 4 prospect, 90th overall by MLB Pipeline.
Yeah, he wasn't going to be a factor, I don't think, this year unless he came up late in the year. But you'd hate to see him miss some time of either double A, triple A at bats, whatever that would be for him, because I don't think he's too far away. He had a double the other day on a 2-strike pitch that he actually kind of choked up to protect and then still mashed it over the right fielder's head.
I have one other question for you.
Yes.
Baseball Tonight podcast, Buster Olney and whoever his partner is on there, they had a prediction the other night when they were recording. They said Elly De La Cruz will become the first MLB player in history to hit 40 home runs and steal 80 bases in a season. Do you think it's possible that Elly will become the first 40-80 player we've ever seen?
I think it's possible. You know what takes a little bit away from the 80 is the 40.
It's less chances on base as much.
Yeah, it's less chances to steal. Man, 80 is a lot, man. If you're hitting 40, 80 is a lot, dude.
80 is a lot, and the problem is when he gets to 40, it feels like we might be like, I don't think that's happening this year, right?
I don't know. I think 40 is a better possibility this year than the 80 is just a lot. 80 means you're not only stealing second a bunch, but you're also stealing third a bunch and then risking stealing third a bunch.
That's fair. I have this vision of Elly as he gets older, not becoming slow, but slowing down just a tad and bulking up a little bit to where he becomes more of a power guy and less of I'm going to steal on every pitch type of guy.
Right. No, I think
that's where I see him hitting more 40 home runs, and at that point I don't see him stealing 80 bases anymore.
Yeah, I think 80 is a big number. I mean I mean he obviously has the skill set, I guess, to do it. It just, like I said, the 40 is going to take away from the 80.
All right. Anything else on the Reds, or can we do some Ask Skinny Anything?
Let's do some Ask Skinny Anything.
All right. Does Skinny have a favorite conference tournament to watch?
I don't know why, and I'm going to watch it today. I have no earthly idea why. Maybe it's because it was one of the only ones you could catch on cable TV way back in the day. I just love the Missouri Valley Conference. There's no rhyme or reason why I love the Missouri Valley Conference. I just do.
That's as good of an answer as any. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I love them all. I mean, I'm sick enough to watch the 12-13 games and the 13-16 games. I just think that the way that those weeks unfold are just fascinating to me. I think Thursday's probably my favorite day because that's when you get a lot of the quarterfinalish rounds going. Some of those quarterfinals get kicked over to Friday. But Thursday and Friday to me, and then it kind of just slows itself down because you got championships Saturday and they're just one right after the other. You got a couple of title games on Sunday, but to me, man, I got free agency this week. And that means I'm probably locked on my computer for a good chunk of it with basketball in the background, noon to midnight. That'll be fine. I'll be stuck with my computer. I got work to do, but I'm going to have basketball on from noon to midnight behind me.
yeah, hopefully the Norse are playing on Monday and Tuesday, so
Yes,
I'll be in
that's
Indy, and
correct.
then the rest of the week, that is my plan. I mean, just all Xavier work, getting ready for the portal, and watching college basketball
So,
tournaments.
so is it in that crappy arena again?
Oh,
You
yeah.
mean?
They've
Okay.
changed the name. They
I
got a
know.
new
I saw the
sponsor
name
for it,
change.
but it is still the dump on the fairgrounds.
Okay, so because I saw the name, I'm like, ooh, is that a new one or is that just the same crappy one with a different name?
Yep, same
Huh.
crappy one with a different name.
Do you have a
Uh,
favorite conference tournament? I'd say what you did the one year, and my boss did it with a buddy of his. I do think going to the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden would be cool as hell.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a good trip. If you're going to make the trip, I think going to the Big East tournament is probably the most fun one. You're in New York, and then you just find your favorite place to post up at during the day and watch all the other games while you're there. Can't get a better environment than New York City for watching the tournament.
Now, I covered Kentucky basketball for 5 seasons. I'm trying to think of all the places. I think we only went Nashville, New Orleans, and Atlanta, where I think they rotated in the 5 years I did at those three cities. Those are three pretty doggone good cities to go to just from a fun perspective outside of work.
Yeah. The other thing I like, though, Skinny, is I like the tournaments that finish early. So, like the Horizon League, the Atlantic Sun, those ones that'll finish early this coming week. I like that too, just because those games are like important games. You're playing for teams to get into the tournament, and it's like nothing else is going
Oh
on
no,
like Monday, Tuesday
dude.
night.
So when we go cover like a Kentucky, and sometimes you got to make your plans, not knowing where they would slot in, to playing. So usually you try to go to a town on like a Tuesday. That was always my favorite time. Tuesday night, you'd have like a triple header of championship games, just no work to do because you've already kind of done your preview stuff and waiting for games to start. You're just posting up, watching these games.
Yep. All right. Do you have a favorite NCAA tournament game that you covered?
I didn't cover this one, but I was in the arena because Kentucky had played earlier. It was the year that Xavier played in Nashville, and David West played for Xavier. And so Kentucky played Ron Hunter's, whatever they were then, IUPUI. I
Yep.
think that might have been the first game of the day. So stayed in the arena because I wanted to watch Xavier play. And after Xavier played, I'm like, well, I'm going to stick around and watch Maryland play a little bit. Or maybe it's vice versa. Maryland might have been first. And a guy named Drew Nicholas hit a shot from midcourt at the banked it in at the buzzer to avert an upset loss to UNC Wilmington. That was pretty fun.
Nice. There are some other NCAA tournament related questions that I'm going to save for next week.
Okay.
Some people sent in,
Yep.
but next week will be tournament week. We'll do everything NCAA tournament for Ask Any
Yeah, I'm trying to
Anything.
think if there's any other NCAA. I mean, I covered the year that Keith Bogans got hurt. That I think that team could have won a national championship. They ended up beating Wisconsin in the semis, then lost to Dwayne Wade and Marquette in the championship game. I can't call that as one of my favorite games to cover, but it was just surreal because they struggled through the Wisconsin game after Keith got hurt, and that was a really good team. I think they beat Marquette. I think they really had a legit chance to win the championship. The only thing there that was in Minneapolis, and by God was it cold. Whew.
Oh yeah. Did Kentucky win it in 2012-13? Was it 12-13 season they won it?
12, I believe, the Anthony Davis
11-12. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was whatever that year was. They played Indiana in the Elite 8 that year. Correct?
That sounds right.
Yeah. Baylor played Xavier. It was a Sweet 16, I'm sorry. It was a Sweet
Okay.
16.
Yeah.
Baylor played Xavier, Indiana, and Kentucky. Same site in Atlanta. So I covered the Xavier Baylor game. Xavier got stomped. It's end of the season. Xavier fans don't really care too much anymore anyway. That we're focused on the postseason and what's going to happen with not transfer portal at that time, but recruiting and all that. So I'm more so like, all right, let's watch this Kentucky-Indiana game now. And if you remember, that was back and forth. I think the score was like in the high 80s or low 90s. I mean, it was just up and down the entire game. Two high-level teams, and obviously that Kentucky team then went on to win it all.
I'll give you one more because it was a singular great performance. It was in St. Louis. It was Kentucky and Tulsa in the I believe round of 32. This was to get to the Sweet 16, and Tulsa had a really good team, but they started three guards and they really didn't have a lot of size. And for whatever reason, they like to play man to man, which is fine. It's your principles. But they put a 6'2" guy on Tayshaun Prince, who wanted to be a wing, right? It's kind of what he was. But Tayshaun Prince was also smart enough to go, I'm just going to go hang out in the post. He scored 41 or 42. I can't remember which was in the low 40s. And I swear he made 15 jump hooks over top of this little dude. Like caught it, turn, scored. Like, what are you doing?
All right. Does Skinny like the new delayed court storming after the opposing team has left the floor?
The whole thing's silly. You can just tell, though, teams are taking this stuff for real. Like, coaches are now going to the mic as soon as games are ended. Like, students, please stay off the floor. And you get like 5 or 6 of them trickle on, and they realize, oh, I wasn't supposed to do this. No, I don't like that. I don't like court storming anyway. I don't like the delayed court storming is even worse because what's the point at that point?
Last night at Ole Miss, I'm not sure if they actually said it over the PA or if this was just what the
because I
announcement
watched. They did because I watched.
But they
it.
said something about save it for NIL money. They didn't want to.
Oh, I
They
didn't
didn't want
hear
to pay
that
the
part of it.
fine. They're like, hey, we got revenue share coming up. We don't want to be paying it out in fines. We're saving this for NIL.
That's funny.
I guess a new way to spin it to the fan base. All right, what's your ideal first warm weather activity after surviving winter, Skinny? Which seems like we're going to have multiple of those opportunities this year because it's gone back and forth 3 times already.
Yeah. Honestly, I like golf, so golf would be up there. But I think there's a day next week. It's going to be in like the high 60s, and like I said, I've got free agency. I might just go sit out back with my laptop just to enjoy the
Reds on the patio.
Reds on the patio with making sure somebody didn't get signed or get an offer sheet from somewhere else.
That was my thought. I thought you would probably say I like to sit out on the patio, listen to the Reds on radio, and have a beverage.
Yes, indeed.
All right, last one here. Is Skinny a St. Patty's Day guy? And if not, did he ever go out for St. Patty's Day?
I've been out. It feels like it's like New Year's. It's like amateur hour to me. I mean, every day St. Patty's Day for me. I hate to be that guy, but I mean, I don't need St. Patty's Day to go drink. I just don't. Sorry to be real with that, but I don't need St. Patty's Day.
My first trip to the Big East tournament, I was with my guy Dan, who used to do my Xavier podcast with me, and we went to Standings, which is my favorite bar in America. It is a college basketball bar in New York City. Very, very cool. But right down the street, maybe 4 buildings away, is I'm blanking on the name. It's the oldest Irish pub in America.
I know the one you're talking. I can't think of it. I know what you're talking about. Yes.
I want to say Kilroy's, but that's the place we're going to in Indianapolis. I can't think of the name of it. Anyway.
Kilroy's is definitely in Indianapolis.
Yeah, that's the Indianapolis bar that we'll be going to next week, hopefully. But no, it's a place there on the block. And people are coming out of there as we're walking out of Standings and going up the street sort of towards them. And there's a group of people, maybe 20s or 30-somethings that walk past us. And we just missed it. Some guy blowing out a giant green barf ball of green beer as we're walking past. And thank God we were not there at the wrong time because we could have gotten plastered by it.
It's just amateur hour to me. I will say a St. Patty's Day mixed in with like, if it's a Thursday or Friday of the NCAA tournament, like for one of those days, that's a good mix.
Yeah, but the only problem with that is if you're trying to go somewhere to watch games and like
everybody's out,
or whatever, everybody's out and everywhere's packed, and it's not like a good environment for watching games because people are like just crowded and drinking and talking. So it's like, I don't love that, to be honest.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah.
But we've all
right,
done
that's
it.
what we got.
All right, good stuff. Thanks for the questions. We'll be back next week as we inch closer to the NCAA tournament. For Rick Broering, I'm Richard Skinner. Thanks for watching. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly potpourri edition, presented by Blake, the Attorney Maislin.